with the nodes set up. Next, I'll be saving them as a digital asset and exposing useful parameters so that the texture mask can be easily customized. So now we've got our noise texture mask. Let's convert this to a digital asset. So I'm going to select everything from the height field visualize all the way down to the last switch and put this into a subnet. Let's bring this up here. Right click on the subnet and create digital asset. I'm going to call this height field texture mask. Again, we can put this into our Pegasus terrain submenu and hit create. Let's begin exposing some parameters for the user interface. I'm just going to hit Shift S on the keyboard to change the layout of our wires to make it a bit more visible. So first of all, I want to add a folder, and I'm going to call this folder blend. And I'm going to set this to be a simple folder. And I want to, first of all, come down to the height field combine layers and drag and drop our 3 blends into this folder. So let's do that now. First of all, the slope, then the curvature, and just drag and dropping this onto the folder, and then blend for the soil. And let's name these. So the first one is slope. Then we had curvature. And then finally soil. And let's also add in a spacer. And then add this overall scale in there as well. Next, I want to add some parameters that allow the user to adjust the slope, curvature, and the texture mask. So I'm going to add another folder. And again, I'm going to set this to a simple folder, and I'm going to call this effects. And first of all, I'm going to come to the mask slope, and I want to drag and drop this slope angle, the min slope angle, into the effects folder. And let's just rename this to slope angle. Because the user only needs to change this min slope angle, as the max slope angle will always update to be a value of 10 above the min slope. Next, let's add the curvature. So I'm going to come to mask curvature, and I'm going to drag and drop this max curvature into the effects folder. And then finally, come over to the mask noise. And on the first mask noise, I'm going to drag and drop this element size into the effects folder. So the user will be able to change the size of the noise. And as I've linked the second height field noise with a relative reference and divided by 10, that means no matter what size the user sets this first element size to, this second element size will always be 10% of the larger element size. Okay, let's hit apply on that and take a look at our digital asset. So the user can reduce the slope layer or increase it. They can adjust the curvature layer influence or the soil, which adds that breakup texture. They can increase the overall scale. And then they can also adjust the slope angle, max curvature, and the size of the soil texture. In fact, let's rename this from element size to soil size. Next, let's add the options for the height field to store and height field to store layer. So I'm going to add in a folder here and call it distort. And let's set this to a simple folder. Actually, let's set this to collapsible. And I'm going to add in here a label heading. And for the first label, I'm going to call it distort by noise. And you want to put the label name in the text field. And let's duplicate that. And the second one, I'm going to call distort by layer. If I hit apply and come up, look at our digital asset, let's just expand this. We now have these two headings, distort by noise and distort by layer. And I want to add the different parameters for each kind of beneath their different heading. So first of all, let's add in this switch. So I want to select the first switch, which was the switch distort by noise, and select input and left click and drag, drop it beneath the heading for distort by noise. I'm going to set this to be a toggle, and let's call this switch distort by noise, just so it's clear which switch this is. And I'm actually going to uncheck label because I don't want to have a label visible for this one. Instead, I'm going to check horizontally join next parameter. Now let's select the height field distort, and I'm going to drag and drop in here the amplitude and put that beneath the switch parameter. And I'm going to change this from amplitude to amount. And I want this parameter to be disabled if this switch is unchecked. So I'm going to come to the amount parameter, and in disable when, I'm going to type in open curly bracket and then type the name of this switch parameter. In fact, let's just select it and copy its name and paste that into the disable when, and then type equals 0, close curly bracket, and hit apply. We take a look at our interface. Now I have this checkbox, and only when I check it will this parameter become active. Let's increase this amount. And if I hit the uncheck, it now enables and disables that feature, and it disables a parameter as well. Now, this is actually way too much, so I'm going to decrease the maximum values of this slider. So let's reduce this range to say 100 and hit apply. Okay, I think that works okay. Next, let's add the parameters for distort by layer. So let's come to the switch first of all, and drag and drop this select input into the distort folder, and I'll put it below this second heading of distort by layer. And let's name this one switch distort by layer. Uncheck label and set the type to toggle. And now let's select the height field distort by layer, and I want to drag and drop the display scale. Again, put into the folder to place it at the bottom, and let's call it amount. And then I also want to add in this control layer. So let's click and drag and drop and add that at the bottom. And again, we want these two parameters to be disabled if this switch distort by layer is disabled. Let's copy that parameter name and select the display scale and disable when, open curly bracket, paste in the name of that parameter is equal to 0, and then close curly bracket. And I'm just going to just copy that, paste that also into disable when for the control layer parameter, and hit apply. And let's come back up to our digital asset and take a look at this distort by layer parameter. So now if I enable it, I can decrease or increase the scale. And I also want to be able to select different control layers. But if I take a look at the moment, we actually see I've got no other entries. And that's because those layers need to be coming in on the second input. So what I'm going to do is click on the second input of our high field distort by layer and come up and connect this to the high field visualize. I'm also going to alt left click on these wires to add these dots, which I can use to just reposition that wire and make it a bit more cleanly readable. So that's coming from the high field visualize down into the second input on the high field distort by layer. Now if I come back to my digital asset, back down to my distort by layers and take a look at my control layer, I now have several different layers to choose from. So with this, if I was to choose, say, cliffs, and increase this scale amount even bigger, you can see where the cliff masks are, it's distorting the layer. Let's try something like riverbed. So that's distorting the masks just in the river areas where the riverbed mask is. So this just gives some extra flexibility where the user can create their own masks to drive the distortion of the noise texture. Just reset these. Okay, let's just hit accept to close type properties window. And one thing I just want to do before we finish up this digital asset, if I add here a height field mask by feature and just place that before our texture mask node, we can see that mask by feature is coming through into our texture mask, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is come into the texture mask digital asset, and what I want to do is select the first height field mask noise and set the combine method to replace. So now that is, rather than adding to any existing mask, it's completely replacing it. So now the end result as just our high field texture mask. So now that's done, I can just delete that high field mask by feature. So now let's just take a look how we can use this digital asset. So I'm going to add in again another high field color adjust and add in this texture mask to the second input and just adjust the color adjust. So let's bring down the camera a little bit until we see something appearing. Let's actually disable these first three color adjusts so we can just see the effect of this mask. So let's play with some of these parameters to increase the slope influence. Maybe increase the curvature a little bit, reduce the noise texture, maybe increase the max curvature, we can increase the soil size, and then maybe add some distort by layer. Let's just slide this down the landscape a little. So we can use this high field texture mask to add some additional texture detail to our high field color. And maybe we don't want to adjust the brightness, we just want to adjust the hue slightly. just to add a bit of visual breakup. Maybe even desaturate it a little bit. So where we've got these uniform areas of green, we've now got a bit of extra variety. And let's re-enable these 3 other color adjusts. And then we have another digital asset which we can use to create an interesting mask to help art direct the look of our color map. So with that done, next we're going to go through exporting the color map and the landscape so we can then import it into Unreal and begin setting up the landscape material.